And we'll report from right across Pakistan as millions of people try to survive in the face of a desperate unfolding tragedy. A third of this country is now underwater, a week after monsoon rain swept away lives, land and livelihoods. All four provinces have been affected. Tens of millions have lost their homes and thousands of buildings, roads and bridges destroyed. In the south, some areas of Balochistan and Sindh saw a 400% increase in average rainfall this monsoon season. And more floodwaters are coming as the Indus River, which runs from the Himalayas down to the Arabian Sea, is overflowing. People here in the district of Dadu are now being urged to move to higher ground to avoid the surge, but for many, there's no help to get them to safety. I'm in Sevan Sharif in southern Pakistan and will report on the exodus of whole communities as they try to flee the floodwaters. Sky's Cordelia Lynch will report from nearby Dadu, where people say there's not enough help to get them to safety. But our first report comes from our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey. He's been to the town of Bahrain in the mountainous Swat Valley in aid is getting through there.
This is desperation beyond a no doubt about it. The disaster caused by this catastrophic event is far from over. There's very little aid relief getting through. When it does, chaos can be moments away. The relief truck is overwhelmed. They scramble on board, grabbing what they can find. Many have lost everything, and families will have anything. The streets of towns along the Swat River are filled with people growing increasingly desperate. The army and police are here to keep order, but imposing that order will get harder as the days pass.
It's been a real change in atmosphere here in the last few days. I think people were very shell-shocked at the beginning, but now actually they seem to be getting angry about the lack of aid that's getting to them. Of course, many of the villages that they're coming from are completely cut off. So it's really desperate. As each day goes by, they're getting more and more angry.
Bahrain is a major town. It's been split in half by the flood. But there is food here. Beyond, there are more than 200,000 people who remain cut off in the mountains. Through the battered town, thousands make their way with whatever they can carry strapped to their backs. It starts at this rickety bridge, streaming across for the start of a dangerous trek to find their families. They've walked 6 to 9 hours to get here, and they will walk back again. They are all exhausted already, but they have no choice but to make the journey. Khalid, with lentils, flour and oil, is on his way back to his wife, children, mother and father. They're all waiting for him. He says it's a tough climb to get there, but he has simply no choice.
36 किलोमीटर दूर जाना है कलाम हम कलाम से सुबह आए थे सुबह 6 बजे हम निकले हैं तो अभी वापस हुए हैं तकरीबन 6 घंटे का रास्ता है अभी 36 किलोमीटर सफर है
Helicopter drops can't feed 200,000 people. It's as simple as that, and they know this.
The point is, these people have simply given up waiting. They've come long distances, and now that they've got whatever provisions they could get, they're going to head back home. It's about 35 kilometres away, incredibly, over those mountains.
The flood has now severed the only road out of Bahrain. The river shifted its position. The locals crisscross the torrent on rickety bridges and even more perilous cable trolleys. We met Shamshaya in the remains of her home. She is 105 years old. Like so many here, she believes the changing weather has caused all this. Her centenarian husband, Chari Gull, agrees with his wife.
It's a disaster.
तबाही
It's a disaster.
अब जमा 120 साल 115 साल उम्र दे 10 सैलाबों चेप्टन नौ रागले
Amid the destruction, families adapt to the new shape of their town, washing in the midst of the newly arrived boulders. But the real priority here is to redirect the river and to start building bridges and repairing roads heading north. Everything beyond this point is destroyed.
People are cut off from that side because no link bridges or all link bridges are washed away by the flood. But alhamdulillah, the local people are help each other a little bit, but the relief is not enough for us. We need a lot of foods items, medicines, and such more items for homes, shelters, etc. That will be a little bit good for us.
Neither faith or resolve can be doubted in Pakistan. But this is simply overwhelming, and they desperately need help. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Bahrain, in the Swat Valley.
Well, Stuart has actually moved now to the city of Valley, from where he joins me now. And Stuart, as your report clearly shows, getting aid in difficult, hard to reach areas is proving pretty tough for people there. It's a problem that's certainly not going to go away, is it?
It really isn't going away, and you're absolutely right. You know, it's getting the aid is one thing. The point is there's not enough coming into the country already, and it's not being distributed properly to the people who actually need it. We're seeing ad hoc deliveries, but that's simply not enough. And I think one of the other issues, of course, as you pointed out, is the infrastructure. Whole towns, villages, bridges, roads have been destroyed. I say we drove up the Swat Valley. It is actually remarkable seeing nature destroy things in such a huge scale. And put it in perspective, the town that we were filming in, you can't reach anymore. The roads that we drove over have slipped. They're now impassable, and the authorities are trying to get those sorted out. At the moment, about 200,000 people are being supplied by helicopters. That's simply not enough. The Pakistan Army just can't deal with the sort of volume of people who need a lot of help. And of course, you've always got to remember the rainy season hasn't ended yet. It's perhaps in the next 14 days we're told that it could start pouring with rain. Now, even if it's not particularly heavy, in these communities that have already been hit by a huge amount of water, more coming down is going to make things even worse. So it really is a big problem, and it isn't going away. Like a lot of natural disasters, things actually get worse as time goes on, not better.
Yeah, and Stuart, you and I have been down that one road towards the Swat Valley many times. It is a treacherous journey as it is. I know people aren't able to get in so much to get to them, but what about people trying to get out as well? How is that faring, and where are they going to?
No, okay, so what's happening, we've noticed, and because you saw in that report that people are actually coming out of these cut-off towns and villages and trying to come and get food. It's very interesting, but when you get to Bahrain, that's like the gateway to the rest of the valley. So there's plenty of supplies coming to there, but they can't get them further on, because really there is just no way. That the bridge in that town has gone, and virtually all the bridges and roads beyond it have gone, so people are walking over the mountains. The thought of a mass movement of people down taking this 6 to 9 hour walk over the mountains, it's one thing for young men, but for whole families I'd say it's virtually impossible. What we understand, you've got to remember firstly that it's only houses and businesses. I say only, but it's the houses and businesses right next to the river that are destroyed. Most of the other towns and villages, of course, that are by the river, anything from behind there, their houses are still intact, so there's no real reason for them to leave other than the lack of resources. And so as soon as that could get sorted, a bigger aid lift, maybe that would help. Crucially, it's trying to build those roads. Now, the local government officials have said they could do that in the next 5 days. I'll be honest with you, I just don't think that's physically possible, not least because one of the roads that we were on, as I was saying, has already collapsed, even though there was traffic moving along it for the past few days. So it just shows that even in an area that has actually been made safe, if you like, Canfor, well, those areas beyond it, they haven't even started work on them. And also in Bahrain, the main bridge that they need to get built to cross so that they can get further north is nowhere near being completed. They're still trying to divert the river that has come the wrong way so that they can then start building the bridge. It really is a huge, huge monumental task. What it's like for those people, we don't know, because we just haven't been able to get there yet. But one has to assume that, I suppose mainly the menfolk will just have to keep doing these incredible journeys to try and get food to them as best they can. Look, we know that the communities there are working really well together so that they will look after one another, but it's really desperate, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think I have to say, same as what I'm seeing here in the south of Pakistan. There is ambitious projections of being able to fix roads and bridges sharpish, but when they're struggling with the rescue effort alone, rebuilding seems a pretty long way off, doesn't it? Let's talk about that rescue effort, Stuart, because as you mentioned in your report, they're using a lot of helicopters to get to hard-to-reach areas and, of course, trying to do aid drops as well. But we know that the weather is set to get worse, not just the monsoon rains, but of course also as autumn and winter sets in the higher regions in Pakistan. That often means that you simply can't fly in that weather. And so in the months to come, if we look ahead, things are going to get worse.
Yeah, and that's been happening actually over the last few days. I know that the Prime Minister, for example, wanted to go to a number of areas. He's been doing a tour of the country, and on a number of occasions, I'm told, he wasn't able to fly because the weather conditions were too dangerous. And you're absolutely right. We're seeing, when we were out yesterday, I think we were seeing 3 or 4 helicopters passing over us. I didn't count any more. We're told it's up to 15, maybe 20 helicopters are going. You're absolutely right. If the weather closes in again, they just simply can't fly. But I suppose crucially, much more to the point, you know, you'll get on a helicopter that is doing this type of relief mission and it can be absolutely full of goods that are needed by the people, but actually it really is a drop in the ocean for 200,000 people. The distribution, there are no real distribution centres up there. We know that even on the road distribution centres, they can descend into chaos very quickly. So distribution in remote communities and even large towns in helicopters is inherently dangerous in its own right, because people who are very desperate have a tendency to surge forward to try and get what's being delivered, and that can be incredibly dangerous. I've seen it in so many natural disasters over the years where that turns into a disaster in itself, trying to deliver the supplies to the people. I think what we really need to see is a sort of really well organised distribution centre up the valley into the areas that really need it. But that is hard to do. Pakistan is crying out for help. It says it really doesn't have the resources to do it. We know the economy is in a real mess. It sort of needs a massive airlift by sort of a United Nations type movement to try and contain the problem in an area and to get food in on a sort of continuous daily basis. But you're absolutely right. If this weather front closes in, and I'm told it could even start today, then it's going to be really miserable up the valley.
Stuart Ramsey, live from Mingora in the Swat Valley. Thanks very much indeed. Well, our chief correspondent was giving you a perspective there from the north of the country. Let's bring you to the south now, and more rain is forecast in the Dadu district. That's just a couple of hours up the Indus Highway from where I am right now, and people there are being urged to move to higher ground. Our Sky correspondent Cordelia Lynch reports now from a marooned village.
You can easily lose sight of the loss here, of the lives buried beneath, the crops, the homes, the hope. We're in the Kachar area of Dadu in Sindh province, a window into a community that's drowning in change.
This is normally completely dry, and look at it now, it's a lake, and in some places it's 20 feet deep, and there are Whole villages completely submerged.
Stranded, standing on what little land is left, these are the people of Jan Mohammed. Huddled together, here for 3 weeks, with no access to aid, clinging onto each other. Lal Khatoon tells me, no one came here to help. Thank goodness I got my children here, but they have fevers and stomach problems. She wants to show me where her home once stood.
This is your house? Completely underwater.
This has become an island, and they are among the most vulnerable.
There's about 100 people living here. Lots of them children, many of them sick. They are desperate to leave, but they're worried there's just no shelter and no food for them anywhere else.
It's cramped, space and sanitation in short supply. And so is medicine, with disease spreading. This boy has spots all over his body. His mother believes it's caused by the floodwater. They're exhausted, but the water is rising, and it's a risk staying put. Many of the children in this area are already malnourished. Lal Khatoon's grandson is 3 months old. He has a fever. There could be very hard days ahead. While they fight for survival, their education is on hold. This is the local school, and they've lost their places of prayer too. Where they walk was once a road, and they can't see a way out. This is being called a climate hotspot, the victim of a world that's playing catch-up.
And Cordelia has now moved to the town of Juhi, still in the district of Dardu, which has also been affected, and she sends this latest report.
Pakistan is stepping up its aid effort, and more food and water are reaching hard-hit communities. The water in the north is also thankfully receding, but here in the south, in the Sindh province where I am, the situation is still very live. This is Sehwan Sharif, and here is the focus of the concern. Look at the water here, 22 feet deep. That is remarkable because this is normally dry. And beyond those trees there is a place called Manchar Lake. Now water is coming there from the north, from Balochistan. They are also expecting more rain in the next few days. Now, if that water comes here and rises just a few feet, breaching this wall, it will run into the neighbouring communities. They are trying desperately to prevent that. They are keeping constant watch of this area. They are laying sandbags. They're using different techniques to try and prevent it from happening. But it's still a deep concern.
Well, I'm in Sehwan Sharif, just further down the road along the Indus Highway, and in fact over the last week since me and my team have been here, we've been travelling along the Indus Highway, the main highway in the Sindh district, to try and gauge the movement of the water. And one night in the middle of the week we heard that yet more towns had been besieged by water. As we drove out along the Indus Highway to find where this water was coming from, we suddenly came to a halt and a complete standstill. The main highway was flooded with people, cattle, chickens, tents, and suddenly it had become a tented city. In fact, the lines from the highway you could see were going right down into the water as a couple of flood barriers. Now, Pakistan, this part of the world, doesn't have many, but those flood barriers had breached overnight, flooding a huge expanse expanse of land. I have to say it is extraordinary. Sometimes we look out and it feels like you're looking at a sea, not somewhere there once used to be land and houses. We actually joined the army, which are carrying out a rescue effort. So far they've managed to save 50,000 people. But as we've been saying all week, more than 30 million people have been affected. So that is just scratching the surface. But here's a story of one family being rescued on an army boat. There's been more flooding. The water has breached yet another flood defence, and this invader is taking over. This is the Indus Highway. It's a road to nowhere. It's completely submerged in water now, and the only way you can get anywhere is by boat. We're about to join a rescue mission because of the people that are trapped far out there. Sikandar is desperate. His family are stuck in their home. The water suddenly burst in.
हम तो उधर सोए पड़े थे, पानी का टाइम ही नहीं था। हम इधर से हमारे को उसने पहले बोला था नहीं आएगा पानी, ये करेगा, हमारे को आसरा था।
We have gone through village after village, and every single house is completely submerged. Not just the ground floors, but the first and second floors in the bigger houses. This is incredibly deep water. After an hour and a half, we finally reached Sikandar's home, and the rescue mission is well underway. The children and women are scared. But here too, not everyone wants to leave the family home. It's a tearful departure.
बहुत तमाम असांखे घणो ड्रिज डप छो, असांखे महीनो सॼो छो, असां ग़रीब हुआसीं। का शइ असांखे खाइण लाइ बि असांजा आदमी बि कोन्हे को। हे नंढड़ो भाई इहो हिकिड़ो मुंहिंजो अधड़ो आहे।
It takes more than 3 hours to carry out this rescue. It's traumatic and emotional.
हमारे बच्चे तुम निकाले हैं, बड़ी बड़ी मेहरबानी। तुम्हारा थोड़ा जिंदगी हम नहीं उतारेंगे। भाइयों की भी मेहरबानी है, कमाल फौजी को हाँ ना सारी की मेहरबानी है, जब है हम परेशान थे बहुत।
And finally, on dry ground. Yet their ordeal is not over. It's only just begun. They have nowhere to sleep, nothing to eat, and have lost their livelihoods in the farms nearby. It's all underwater. Well, let's turn our attention now to the global effort to help the people of Pakistan. The United Nations has appealed for £136 million to help fund relief operations here, and the UK has pledged to provide £15 million of that aid effort. People across the United Kingdom are doing their bit to try to help too. Sky's Sabah Chaudhry reports now from Peterborough.
This call to prayer is a call to action. To Muslims, faith is a verb. More than just reading, it's putting principles into practice.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tests different people on different days. Tomorrow it could be us that is going through a flood, famine, droughts, hunger, difficulty. We don't want that to be us. And should that be us, we are going to find rest in the fact that there are our brothers and sisters across the globe who are going to help us.
Those who are suffering in Pakistan, brothers.
The floods may have happened 4,000 miles away in Pakistan, but the scale of suffering is felt strongly among Britain's Muslims. Charity is a pillar of the faith.
If you're planting good seeds, then hopefully you will be able to sow some good karmas in the future.
Some of them don't have food and they're suffering, and a lot of people have, so I think we should help them, and it will be very kind to. Parents are suffering as well because what their children need food as well.
Despite the cost of living, up to £6,000 was raised in 1 hour. Small change to many, making a big difference.
Would you like a receipt or?
The funds raised from today's collection is going to go on to help provide emergency aid to those that are vulnerable at the moment. from food packs to emergency hygiene kits to even putting people into shelter as well.
Back at the congregation, emptier wallets, but prayers heavy with hope for the people of Pakistan. Sabah Chowdhury, Sky News, Finsbury Park.
Well, people right across the UK are making efforts to try and help people here in Pakistan. And Sky's Aisha Zahid joins me live now from Peterborough. Aisha, tell us about the efforts people are making there to try to help.
Well, up and down the country, local groups, communities, charities are coming together to raise money, and that's exactly what they're doing here at Children of Adams. They've held various fundraising events throughout the week, and they say they've raised around £30,000 so far. We can speak to one of the co-founders, Shuja. So you've been on a bike ride today. Tell me about that, but also tell me about the other events you've held over the last few weeks.
Basically this week, since the floods have got worse, we've had a radio appeal where we raised over £22,000. We had a cake bake sale which raised roughly about £4,000, and some of the lads went on a bike ride today which raised about, how much was that, about £2,000 today. So, and we're going to keep raising and keep going until basically we can get enough assistance out there that's needed.
And how much difference is this money going to make?
It's going to make a world of difference, because at the moment you've got people out there that have lost everything. They've lost their homes, they've lost their way of living, their means of living. So it's a case of this is basically do or die.
And what's the response been like from the local community?
Absolutely amazing. We keep getting phone calls, we're inundated with emails of how people can help, what they want to do as fundraisers, or how they can fundraise. So we're still sort of like going to go through it. Unfortunately, at the moment it's a race to get aid out there, but this is going to be a long marathon where this is going to be sort of, the aid's going to be needed over a long period of time.
And on that note, you haven't just started fundraising now, you've been putting efforts in since June, right?
Yeah, when the rain started to first fall, we have been working on the ground there since June. Originally it was just food packs, but now it's got a lot more serious than that, because they've got nowhere to cook, so now it's hot meals, tents, medical aid.
And how much longer do you think you'll have to keep going?
Years. In all honesty, it's going to be years, because you know, when you think the country, the flood area is the size of the UK, how long is it going to take to clear that up?
Great, thank you very much for joining us. So they've had a successful bike charity event today. They've raised over 30,000 for people in Pakistan displaced to raise money for foods, tents, medicine over there. And they might be off today, but they've got plenty more planned on the horizon over the next coming few weeks.
Aisha Zahid live from Peterborough. Thanks very much indeed. Well, the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee says that they've managed to raise, in just 2 days, £13.5 million. And I'm joined now live by Saleh Said. He's the UK's Chief Executive of the Disasters Emergency Committee. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us on this special programme live from Pakistan. Where are you with the aid effort right now?
So first of all, a huge thank you to everybody that's contributed to the Disasters Emergency Appeal. Over £13.5 million has been raised in just 2 days, and that's the hard efforts of people up and down the country, as your report's just shown now. The scale of the devastation in Pakistan is absolutely huge and very, very destructive. Bridges destroyed, schools destroyed, people's homes and livelihoods have been washed away. But our aid organisations, 11 organisations who are working on the ground directly and also with local partners, including the Pakistan government and, of course, the United Nations, to coordinate the scaling up of urgent emergency aid. We are reaching people with essential supplies. Those who have lost their livelihoods will be and are getting food. Those who have lost their homes are getting emergency shelter, tents and the like. And of course, the distribution of clean water. The risk of waterborne diseases is very, very high, and it's essential that people get the aid they need. And I can assure your viewers that the aid organisations on the ground are coordinating and scaling up for this huge operation that's absolutely essential to save and protect lives.
I want to talk to you about the future of the fundraising effort, because I have to say, and all the correspondents from Sky News here on the ground are saying that we really need to see more efforts on the ground. It's not just financial donations that Pakistan needs. You know, I've covered the 2010 floods, and of course we saw the 2008 devastating earthquake. We saw international teams flying in to help people on the ground. We're simply not seeing that, and this is a gargantuan issue here. It's a major flood.
Yeah, I think first and foremost we must give huge credit to the local people who are responding. In all emergencies, it's the first responders, communities themselves, helping each other, rescuing each other and sharing what they have. But also it takes time for the international aid effort to get going. The coordination is happening as we speak. The logistics of getting around, flying into and dropping aid into a country that now has a third of its area underwater is very, very difficult, but not impossible. And aid is getting through and will continue to be scaled up to ensure that we reach as many people as possible.
Saleh Saeed from the UK Disasters Emergency Committee. Thanks very much indeed for joining us live here on Sky News. Well, here in Pakistan, as we've been speaking, I have to tell you that floodwaters are rising, certainly right across the province of Sindh. This water here has risen this morning alone, and in the last few hours, just before we came on air, there was a tent city on that muddy bank behind me over my left shoulder. It has gone. People have moved on because they've heeded the warnings, at least here, that they need to leave. Other people are refusing and staying in their homes. But as this disaster unfolds, we are trying to bring you exactly what the people of Pakistan are going through and just how much help they really need. Thanks very much indeed for joining us live from Pakistan in this special program with Stuart Ramsey in the Swat Valley, Cordelia Lynch in Dadu, and me, Saima Mohsin, in Sevan Sharif.